All right, so let's get right into it. In the whole world of modern spirituality, there are few names that stir things up quite like Jed McKenna. He's an author whose work basically promises to just shatter all your illusions about enlightenment. But the biggest illusion might just be the author himself. So today, we're going to unpack the ideas, the controversy, and the central mystery of who or what Jed McKenna really is.
So his books, starting with his famous Enlightenment trilogy, have built this really serious, almost cult-like following. And look, these are not your typical, feel-good spiritual guides. Not at all. Instead, they offer this stark, kind of irreverent, and just brutally direct path to what he calls truth with a capital T. It's provocative, it's challenging, and for a lot of people, it's absolutely captivating.
And this is where it gets really, really interesting. Because for a teacher who's all about absolute, brutal honesty, the identity of Jed McKenna is a complete black box. The name, it's a pseudonym. And the stories in his books are all presented as true accounts. But there's a growing mountain of evidence that suggests the man himself might be a literary creation.
And then, boom, this bombshell drops. A man named Ken McMorty, shortly before he passed away, actually claimed that he was the consultant for the Jed McKenna character. He even says his name was basically unscrambled to create the pseudonym. I mean, this just throws the whole thing into question, right? If the teacher is a fiction, what does that mean for the teaching? So let's put a pin in that for a second, because to really get the controversy, you first have to understand what the teaching even is.
To really wrap your head around what McKenna is all about, you got to understand his main metaphor for human consciousness. He says our normal state of being is kind of like sitting in a movie theater, totally asleep, just completely lost in the drama on the screen, believing every second of it is real.
So McKenna basically splits all of humanity into two camps. On one side, you have the human child, and that's, well, pretty much all of us. We're living in what he calls an ego-bound state. We think we're awake, but we're just dreaming. Then on the other hand, you have the human adult. This person has had a massive breakthrough. It's this huge life-altering event where you wake up inside the dream. You realize it's a dream, and suddenly life is all about growth and real discovery.
But, and this is so important, becoming a human adult isn't the finish line, not even close. According to McKenna, that's just the first real step. See, true enlightenment isn't just knowing you're in a dream. It's waking up from the dream entirely. It's a subtle distinction, but it changes everything. So, how are you supposed to do that?
Okay, this is where McKenna's method gets, well, really intense. He suggests one single, powerful, and, let's be honest, kind of brutal process for destroying your own illusions. He's not interested in gentle mantras or peaceful meditation. Nope. He offers you a sword, and he expects you to use it on yourself.
He calls it spiritual autolysis, and the name really says it all. Auto means self, and lysis means to break down. It's literally a process of self-digestion. The whole point is to systematically take apart every single belief you hold dear until there is nothing left but what is undeniably true. And here's how it actually works. It's a writing practice. You just take a belief, any belief, it doesn't matter, and you write it down. Then you attack it. You dig into its foundations. You keep asking, is this absolutely true? And you follow that thread all the way down. So you might start with something simple like, I love my family. And by the end of it, you're questioning the very nature of I and love. And that is the whole point of the intellect in McKenna's system. It's not for building some beautiful, elaborate philosophy. No. It's a weapon. It's the sword you use to dismantle your own ego, belief by belief, in what he calls a slow and agonizing suicide. It sounds intense, yeah, but he argues it's the only real way to get to what's true.
Now, as you can probably imagine, not everyone is a fan of this hardcore approach. Critics point to several pretty major blind spots in McKenna's philosophy that they say aren't just misleading, but maybe even dangerous.
The first big critique is that it's all just way too melodramatic. McKenna presents enlightenment as this violent all-or-nothing war where you have to burn down your entire life. But critics say, hang on, it doesn't have to be that way. You can awaken and still appreciate and enjoy your human life. It doesn't need to be this huge, destructive drama. And then there's this claim that there are no others. This is a huge sticking point for a lot of people. Critics argue that this is just one unproven perspective, and it goes completely against our deep gut feeling, that intuition from the heart, that other people are real, that they have their own consciousness, their own valid experiences.
Next up, his nihilism. You know, the whole nothing matters thing. But again, critics will say this is just one side of the coin. It's just a single dimension of reality. There's an equally valid reality where everything matters. Every choice, every connection, every single moment. To fixate on only one of those is to have a seriously incomplete picture.
And maybe the biggest blind spot of all for many people is the total absence of love in his teachings. McKenna completely separates truth from love. And critics call this woefully mistaken. They argue that when you truly experience wholeness, unconditional love isn't just a feeling, it's a fundamental quality of reality itself. So this brings us full circle. Right back to our central mystery, you've got these radical, stark teachings on one side and some very serious criticisms on the other, and this whole time it's all sitting under the shadow of a teacher who might not even be real.
Somebody on Reddit just summed up the whole paradox perfectly. A huge part of McKenna's persona is that he's the real deal, more real than any other teacher out there. So the irony of a fictional character making that claim, it's almost too perfect. It forces you to question the entire foundation of his authority.
And this leaves us with the ultimate question. You have to wonder, maybe the fictional nature of the teacher is the final teaching. If the entire point of the path is to destroy your own identity, to see that the self is an illusion, then does it really matter if the finger pointing the way is also an illusion? Is the messenger just one more belief you're supposed to throw on the fire? That, right there, is the Jed McKenna mystery.